What's going on, guys? Welcome into the Week 7 version of the Fantasy Slant Waiver Wired Show, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by Pro Football Focus. I am your host, Mike Tagliere, and alongside of me, I have two of our normal co-hosts. We actually had to drop one. We were dealing with a connection issue, and we want to make sure that going forward that the audio issues are solved. We think we got it down this week. We got Marianne Lee. Brandon, how are you doing this fine Tuesday morning?
I'm doing okay. I already berated Daniel, who is not here, for getting me up in the mornings now. No, I'm just kidding. I actually kind of like it. I have never been a 6 a.m. riser, but it's starting to work for me a little bit. Feeling productive.
I like it. That's a fun thing about me is I actually like getting up. I typically am up by like 5:30 in the morning, not because I have to be, because I want to be. I just feel like life's too short and I want to enjoy as much of the day as I can.
That's how I feel at 1 a.m. when I'm still awake.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm in bed by 10 o'clock. That's that part. I'm in bed by 10. I'm up by like 5.
Yeah, that's our difference.
But yeah, one of those things that you're able to enjoy during the day is actually going to a football game. I went to the Cardinals game last night. I got to witness David Johnson live. It was just ridiculous what that guy can do on the football field. Outside of that, it was a pretty boring game. But our other co-host, Nathan Jahnke, he had some big news yesterday. Nathan hit 25,000 followers on Twitter. He is the man. He even got a retweet from Adam Schefter. Nathan, how you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying this season. Each week it keeps getting better. I keep on getting more followers on Twitter too. I don't get to be a morning person like you guys since I have to stay up doing the Thursday and Sunday and Monday night games and then Saturday college football as well. So I have to stay up so I don't get up that early, but I still made it up early enough for this.
When do you go to bed?
Typically Sundays, Thursdays, and around 1 o'clock, and then Saturday nights it's up till 2, 3 in the morning, making sure we get all the college stuff done that we need.
Wow. What does Nathan Jahnke do in the off season?
In the off season, I do everything from training some of our new people. I'm involved with hiring our part-time staff a lot. I'm our director of analytics, so anything that has to do with numbers, I get to do the 0 to 100 numbers on the site. These past 2 off seasons, I've done a ton of work on, and I'll probably continue to do plenty of work on next off season too. That's
fantastic. I was saying on Twitter, you're a great follow. Just it's the best free information out there you guys can get. And if you guys want to, Nathan on Twitter, you are at PFF. Is it underscore? Go ahead.
I'll underscore Nate Jahnke.
Yeah.
Yeah, PFF underscore Nate Jahnke, NATEJAHNKE.
And Brandon is at her fantasy.
No, at Brandon her FFB.
Brandon her, yeah. I'm going to screw this up every single time, guys.
Although you can follow her fantasy football at her fantasy FB, but that's my other show. But yeah.
Yeah, she's a busy lady. She did a Periscope yesterday on the PFF account. She's doing that every single week. Each one of us are taking over the Twitter account at some point during the week. So I'll be doing that on Friday, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Waiver Wire Edition. And this week is a pretty good one. There's a lot of big names that have hit the waiver wire. I have some really important PSA announcements too that I'm going to touch on. There may be some superstars in your league that are on the waiver wire, and you may have not realized it. I'm going to talk about those players as we go through, but let's start as we always do, guys. We're going to start with the quarterback position, and I don't think we could talk about any other quarterback outside of Marcus Mariota at the top of the show. He's been fantastic the last couple weeks, 6 touchdowns. He's only thrown for 447 yards, but he's still getting it done with his legs. He's got a rushing touchdown as well. The opposing defense is going to continue to worry about stopping DeMarco Murray. Is Marcus Mariota the real deal, Brandon? Are you willing to pick him up and use him, maybe as your 70% starter and only bench him if he's got a really tough matchup?
No, but I will play him in good matchups, and he goes up against Indianapolis this week. So that to me is a good matchup. So to me, he's still matchup dependent, totally 125%. I think that this is interesting. Kendall Wright coming alive, Rashard Matthews coming alive. I think there's some interesting players out there. Tajay Sharp has all but disappeared. So if you have him on your roster, there's just zero reason for that. So wake up.
Yeah. Tajay Sharp, the coach, he came out afterwards, and Tajay Sharp, he said he took a step back, even though Tajay Sharp has been playing all the snaps.
Yeah. No, I mean it's unbelievable what's going on with him, but I certainly think that there are other options that we're going to discuss later on in the show. I think the fact that he played 163 yards last week, 284 this week. Yes, the 3 touchdowns each game definitely boosts it, but before that he had 0 touchdowns for 2 games. So it's a little too up and down for me for him to be a 70% starter, but certainly in good matchups, again, Indianapolis being one of those. Absolutely. So, and also in good news, his bye week is week 13. So you have some time to really kind of ride this wave as long as it lasts.
Yeah, no, I tend to think that the offense has changed a little bit. I did go back and watch last week's game, and they did use the option a lot more. This week it was Cleveland, so I don't know if I want to take to put too much stock into it.
And then it was Miami the week before. I just want to point that out again.
Yeah, well, I mean. Miami. I don't even want to talk about that game. That was a mess. That was a fun stat. Is that Ben Roethlisberger was the only quarterback this week to throw more interceptions than touchdowns. The only one. Well, actually, I should say that was until last night when Ryan Fitzpatrick and both Geno Smith did the same thing. But another quarterback, Nathan, I want to talk about is Case Keenum. That he's got 2 top 10 performances now on the season. Kenny Britt is stepping up. Brian Quick, even to an extent, is doing all right. Tavon Austin is doing horribly. But how do you feel about Case Keenum? Is he someone that you could start in 2 quarterback leagues, or is this more of like, it's going to be once in a while he has a good game and you never want to rely on it?
I think he's someone where in 2 quarterback leagues, sure, you can start him a decent number of games, and then matchup dependent, I think you can start him. He's someone that's like a lot of average to below average quarterbacks, that he's very dependent on how much pressure is put on him. The last 2 weeks, the offensive line has done a decent job keeping him away from pressure, so he's had good games recently. But I could see teams that have better defensive lines getting more pressure on him, and that'll really hurt his numbers. So I think he's someone where if a team has a good pass rush, probably don't start him. If they don't have a good pass rush or even an average pass rush, he should put up some decent numbers. But this upcoming week, I believe it's the Giants that he plays, and with JPP and Olivier Vernon, I might not want to start him this upcoming week, but he's still someone
I might not want to.
Future.
Yeah, no. I definitely agree with you there. I don't think he's very exciting. Some of the more exciting players that we're going to talk about here, it's going to be more of like streaming options. Kaepernick, we touched on last week. We know what he is. He's got a great matchup this week, but I don't want to spend too much time on Kaepernick. We did talk about him last week, but I do want to touch on some streaming options that we have this week. And Brandon, let's start with you on Joe Flacco. He's going to be going up against the Jets. We know, I guess you could say that they shut down Carson Palmer last night. But the Jets defense has been horrific. Would you feel comfortable starting Flacco even though he hasn't really lived up to expectations this year?
I mean, if I'm really desperate, of course, but the only game that he's had over 20 fantasy points in was against Oakland. He didn't even do well against Washington, at the Giants. At Cleveland, he couldn't even get over 16 fantasy points. So I'm a little bit worried about him as like a high ceiling guy, probably a high floor, frankly, against the Jets. But certainly, yeah, 1 touchdown for Palmer wasn't exactly exciting. And again, to Michael Floyd, who's just getting saved by these touchdowns. He's really not playing good football. But anyway, so I think that this is a bit of a Hail Mary for me. I think there are better people this week to look at. Mariota being one against Indianapolis again. Mm-hmm. But certainly, my problem with Flacco is that he just hasn't lived up to expectations over and over and over again. And this week, he was the reason why they didn't win that game.
Yeah. No, he absolutely was. It definitely wasn't on Terrence West, that's for sure. He's been playing fantastic. I don't think you could ever fully trust Flacco. If you're in a dire situation, he's not a bad play this week. But one player who a lot of people trusted last week, and it didn't really pan out for them, and he's another player where I tell people, I'm like, I just never feel comfortable starting him, and that's Alex Smith. He played the Oakland Raiders last week. Now, the excuse that I can give him is that the weather was atrocious.
That really bad.
That field was nasty in Oakland, so it's going to be tough. He should have had 1 touchdown, but they called it a lateral to Dontari Poe, which, by the way, I think Nathan Jahnke plays in a league where he owns. Don't you own him in our dynasty or something like that?
I would.
But Nathan, this week, Alex Smith gets to go up against New Orleans. Some people say that it's a better matchup than Oakland. I don't know if I'd go that far. I think the Saints are extremely beatable on the ground, and that's where I think the Chiefs' bread and butter is at home. Would you start Alex Smith over Joe Flacco this week?
I might start him over Flacco. I think Smith, even though he disappointed in fantasy leagues this past week, he only had 22 pass attempts. On those 22 pass attempts, he looked really good as a passer. He just didn't get a touchdown or as many yards, but he still averaged 10 yards per attempt, which is very good. So Smith has been looking good recently, and the Saints have allowed a ton of points. So even though Smith hasn't been getting the touchdowns, yeah, I could see the running game getting a couple touchdowns in there, but I could see Smith at least getting 2 touchdowns this week against that Saints defense.
The weird part with Alex Smith is he used to be able to rely on, 30, 40 rushing yards a game, and he hasn't done anything. I think he's ran the ball. I think it might be 20 yards this season is all he's got running the ball, which is it's not good because that used to raise his floor, so where we knew where his floor was. But I do believe at home versus the Saints, he should be able to be a fine streamer. And would I start him over Joe Flacco? Probably, just because of the fact that Joe Flacco is missing Steve Smith, and that wide receiving core is a little iffy. Another streaming option, and this one, Brandon, our listeners right now, they're going to have to make this decision extremely soon, and that's Brian Hoyer. If he's not already owned in your league, he's going up against a Green Bay defense that it seems like Sam Shields is going to be out again. Randall might be out again, so they may be down their top 2 cornerbacks in this matchup. Green Bay's defense has been a funnel to this point. Last week they allowed some rushing, but they really haven't allowed much to running backs. Brian Hoyer, how do you feel about him on Thursday night? Is he someone that you think should be higher on the list than Joe Flacco and Alex Smith?
Oh, yeah. No doubt. 0 doubts. None. He's the number 1 guy on this list. Number 1. 4th. He's had 4 games in a row with over 300 yards. The only reason his fantasy game wasn't fantastic last week was because he didn't throw any touchdowns. He's yet to throw an interception. He's at Green Bay. This is a must-win game, a divisional matchup, for both teams. So I think they're both going to be playing their little hearts out. Absolutely. I don't see his numbers going down whatsoever. Prior to that, he'd scored 2 touchdowns in the 3 games prior to last week. So if he can get his numbers back up to that looks great. Alshon Jeffrey finally got involved. Praise be, right? I mean, hello. And then Cameron Meredith isn't going anywhere. We just saw that. Mm-hmm. Jordan Howard, like I had kind of said, was, not as effective as he had been the previous weeks. But they were playing against a tough run defense. So that was what happened. So, yeah, absolutely. No problem. Nathan, to me, I've been playing him for 4 weeks straight, and I haven't taken him out yet because I've been streaming, and I'm like, I still like him this week. And then he goes up against Minnesota, and he's going to go bye-bye. Bye-bye. But this week, yes.
Nathan, do you agree with her, or would you play Brian Hoyer on the road in Green Bay over the other options we talked about?
I'm a little less optimistic about Hoyer because he hasn't been going up against a good edge rush in any of these recent weeks. He's been going up against a lot of teams with bad either defensive ends and their 3-4-3 or outside linebackers in the 3-4, where the Packers, Nick Perry, Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, they've all been doing really well so far this season. So I could see the Packers getting more pass rush against the Bears than Hoyer has been seeing, which should hurt his numbers a little bit. But with all the Packers cornerback injuries, I could still see Hoyer having a good game, just maybe not quite as good as he has been seeing these past few weeks.
That makes sense. And if you guys were here last week, Nathan told you that Ryan Tannehill wouldn't be pressured very much by the Steelers front, and actually won that game. And
but
we
move on to running backs. Literally, it was all Jay Ajayi. Let's be honest here.
We can't go one show without Brandon getting a stab in at Ryan
putting
Tannehill.
It out there.
We know that. So I have a PSA for each of the main positions this week, and the one for this week is that if Andy Dalton is not owned in your league, he needs to be right now. He's playing Cleveland this week, and I don't really care if you have Matt Ryan. I don't care if you have Tom Brady. It doesn't matter. You should be picking this guy up because if you have one of those guys, you're going to be playing Tom Brady or Matt Ryan. I get that. But if somebody else is playing you don't want them to be playing Andy Dalton against you. So therefore, it's kind of worth it to me to grab Andy Dalton and maybe drop someone like James Starks or somebody like that you had on your bench sitting there, Buck Allen, whoever it is that you have on your bench that you probably should have dropped a long time ago. Andy Dalton might be worth it. Take a look at your opponent's roster. If they're streaming quarterbacks, block them from getting Dalton this week. That's just that's a little tip. I'm going to have one at the running back position, a couple at the wide receiver position we're going to talk about.
I just wrote my article on Andy Dalton today.
You did?
He's did.
He's going to be a fantastic play this week. Fantastic. The Browns are so bad. But I want to go to running back, and I know that a lot of people are going to expect that Jay Ajayi would be the top person we're going to talk about, but I'm not going to do that. The reason I'm not going to do that is because the guy at the top of my list has not been getting near the love that he should. What if I were to tell you that the guy who is the number 8 running back in standard leagues and number 6 in PPR leagues over the last 2 weeks is unowned in 50% of leagues? That is James White. James White continues to be underrated. Nathan, can you explain to me why people keep underrating this guy? Like, why is he not owned in 50% of leagues?
Because they haven't caught on yet, because his snaps have been going up each week, his carries have been going up, his targets have been going up. So if they haven't been paying attention, then it's understandable he wasn't owned earlier, but he needs to be owned now. He's been a huge part of the Patriots offense now with Tom Brady back. The only concern that I would have with White is in a game where if the Patriots were blowing someone out, then they would just run a lot late, which means White might not be on the field as much. But any game that's competitive, White should be on the field more than enough to see the targets he needs to score you plenty of points to have him in your lineup.
Well, that's what I think about it. And like the last 2 weeks, I mean, the Patriots have pretty much smoked their opponents. I mean, last week wasn't as much as the week before, but James White has been productive in both games. And honest to God, like when you see that guy with the ball in his hands, he just looks fantastic. Brandon, are you with Nathan and I that James White is better than advertised?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He should definitely be owned over a lot of the people that people have been stashing forever, being like, oh, I can't wait for Fozzie Whitaker to come back. It's just like, come on now, get it together. James White's out there, get it together. Yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously he is much more productive in PPR leagues. He had his most carries of the season last week, and that was 7. So he will never get double-digit carries. You are touchdown dependent if you are in a standard league. But again, you could do worse for sure. But definitely in PPR leagues, he's a no-brainer, must add. Absolutely, go check it out. And in fact, I would actually trade low for him maybe.
You could. I mean, depending on how savvy the owner is. Like me, sure. I think James White going forward is an RB2. That is until Deion Lewis comes back and then totally messes up our lives. But so, guys, I want you guys to answer this, though. If James White and Jay Ajayi are on waiver wires in your league, which running back are you picking up?
I'd go with White. I think he's more dependable.
Yeah, White. No problem.
There we go. I'm glad I put it at the top then, because I know a lot of people are talking about Jay Ajayi, so let's talk about him. I wrote my fantasy stock market, which went up this morning, and I have it in there as a sell high on Jay Ajayi. I actually recommend that if nobody owns him, you pick him up and then trade him immediately, because his value will never be higher. Like the things that went his way this week. Okay, so first, Arian Foster was limited. You know, they were easing him back into the offense, which I'm not saying he's going to be a huge part, but I'm saying he's going to be a part of that offense. All right, so that happened. Cameron Hayward, Ryan Shazier were out for the Steelers. Those are 2 of their better run stoppers in that defense. The Dolphins were at home. The Dolphins were winning the entire game. Now, let's talk about this, Brandon. How many times are any of those things going to happen ever again? Like, are the Dolphins ever going to be in a lead the entire game? Like, is that going to happen?
No. But I do think that Jay Ajayi, this is a very rough year for running backs if you didn't get the top ones. And a lot of people went 0 RB this year, and they're desperate. I'm excited to kind of look back and see what draft strategies were working or not, because actually the top running backs, other than Adrian Peterson, are doing pretty dang well. So those of you that waited are sitting there going, oh, I would love Jay Ajayi. And I get it. You probably would. But I think it's time to do some trading. And that's what's really interesting about like week 7, week 8 is that, you know, this is the last minute adjustment. And for me, Jay Ajayi, you're right, is the perfect piece that I want to trade and get someone who I actually think will be doing this every week. You know, I will say though, and then if you look at the snap numbers that, you know, Nathan always tweets out, and it's fantastic. You know, they keep saying that there are other people that are competing for this, but it looks like this is Jay Ajayi's job unless Foster all of a sudden becomes miraculously healed. I thought he was going to be playing a lot more, but he's not. And this is Jay Ajayi's job.
I think that Foster, at the beginning of the week, they said he's probably going to play. And then as the practice week went on, he was very limited in practice. They were saying that it was possible that he wouldn't even go. They decided to make him active. That's why I think he only played, I think it was 11 snaps. That's why I think what happened with Foster, I think Foster is the go-to passing down back. And that is why I don't like Jay Ajayi. I said that his talent's not the issue. I don't think anybody's questioning his talent.
Yeah, he's only had one reception. He had one reception last week for 3 yards.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'm not questioning. I'm questioning the situation. I'm saying that in his situation in Miami, there's no way he's going to succeed. Yeah. There's no way that he's going to live up to the perception that people now have of him after a 200-yard game against the beat-up Steelers. Nathan, are you a fan of Jay Ajayi, or are you someone that would say, well, no, Mike, if I grabbed him, I'd probably hang on to him?
I agree with everything that you have been saying, but he has looked really good these past 2 weeks running with the ball. You said we're not really questioning his talent, but his talent is finally showing. So while I would probably trade him, there is still a chance that if his talent continues to show, that they'll still be giving him the ball a lot more than they had been giving him. Yeah, he probably won't see another 200-yard, 2-touchdown game anytime soon, but he has been playing well. He does have the offensive line back, and he did well despite the offensive line. The offensive line did a really good job pass protecting this week now with everyone, but they didn't do as good of a job run blocking. So if the offensive line can get a couple of games together and get into some rhythm and help Ajayi, even if he's not getting as many catches or as many touches as we want, I could see him continuing to do well. But I could also see this being a situation where it is Miami. If he is off to a poor start some game, then some other running back could start seeing carries and they could just go with the hot hand. So I would always be worried anytime I start him, but I do think there is a chance he could be doing a lot better than he has been doing.
Yeah, just keep that in mind, guys. It's like, Adam Gase has said, it's almost like he will ride the hot hand. He'll give anybody a shot. So if Ajayi struggles, keep in mind, he didn't top 42 yards on the ground before this week. So it's not like, people had him in their lineup and they expected this from him. Nobody expected this. Nobody had him in their lineup. So these points almost don't exist. But let's move on to the next.
I would say that it exists, but I want to say though, some people are starting DeAndre Washington. They're starting, they're getting Zach Zenner is now going to be a big buzzword. It's desperate. So, I want to be fair to the people listening that are like, I would love to have Jay Ajayi. That's a real thing.
Yeah, no, my take is that I think you can get more for him than he's worth. Right now, I think his stock is as high as it will ever be.
Fair.
But the next running back, Nathan, Chris Ivory, I don't know if this is an exciting one for me. I wasn't excited to draft him. I don't own him on any of my season-long teams because I believe TJ Yeldon was the more well-rounded running back of the two. I did feel like the touchdowns would be there for Ivory, but it's going to be more of like a one-off situation. This Jaguars offense doesn't look very good right now. Do you think that Ivory is going to have enough scoring chances to be, a flex play every week?
I don't think he is, at least currently, to be a flex play every week. I think he's basically been the player that we thought he would be. Now that he's starting to get healthier, he's getting a decent number of carries, not really seeing much in the passing game, and then getting the goal line opportunities. So if the goal line opportunities aren't there, he's not going to get nearly the points you want. So unless the Jacksonville's offense starts doing a lot better, or unless Ivory starts doing a lot better to steal more of those carries away, he's not someone that I'd be excited about right now.
Yeah, no, I'm not too excited about him. That's why I don't want to spend too much. But what I do want to take time is talk to Brandon about this next running back we have on the list because it's a Bronco. Brandon, we know she's a Broncos fan. A lot of people have been talking about Devontae Booker and saying that he's a must-own, that, you got to have this guy, and he's getting more and more snaps. But here's my take on it, Brandon. So I'm going to let you give your rebuttal. But C.J. Anderson is a very talented running back. Okay, I'm not saying that he's the best running back in the world, but he's very talented, very talented. And yes, we're seeing more snaps for Booker, but let's pretend, okay, that Booker steals the job. He's never going to fully take it away, but let's say that he gets a 60-40, 70-30 even timeshare. What C.J. Anderson has done with the workload, you're not impressed. It hasn't done much for your fantasy team. So what makes you think that do you think Booker's more talented, I guess, first off? And second, what makes us think that Booker would do any better if he did see increased work? I think that he's a pure handcuff to me. I think that's all he is.
Well, last week, Anderson played in 57 of the 73 offensive snaps. Meanwhile, Booker only played in 15. However, it felt like it was a split. I don't like that. However, a ton of long runs, including a touchdown, were called back on penalties for CJ Anderson. His game was not as bad as it looks in the box score. It was a very sloppy, weird game that was called in a bizarre way because Coach Kubiak was out. And I think that people really underestimated the effect that would have on the team. There is no business in the world that would say that Trevor Siemian should be passing 50 times in a game. I don't care what the score is. I don't care what's going on. It was a bizarre game plan. It was completely erratic and just bizarre. Also, Demaryius Thomas needs, I don't know what he needs, but it's something.
He's not playing very well.
So what's happening is that they're just defending the run. And again, these penalties are killing CJ Anderson's numbers. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't pick up Booker, especially if you are a CJ Anderson owner. I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, I kind of feel the same way that you do. I'm not entirely sure Booker's going to take this job or that he's going to run with it anywhere. Anything's going to happen here. I think that these are two bizarre weeks back to back. You know, Paxton Lynch being in before, and then it was Trevor Siemian, but Kubiak wasn't there. And Stevenson's been out. Virgil Green's been out. I thought that would help with the blocking, but I don't think they're 100% because the blocking was not great again. So I'm a little worried about the run game in general. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I feel like I'm a little bit at a loss right now. I kept thinking these would be the games that CJ Anderson would come forward. I'm interested to see what Nathan thinks of this, but definitely the calling back of those big plays just killed him. If he would have had even one of those big plays, it would have been a different story. So, and I believe there were 3 that were called back that were like of 20 or more yards. It was nuts.
Yeah, he lost, I think it was Jake Seeley that said he lost 11.9 fantasy points on penalties. And I tweeted out actually watching that game that one of the best runs that I've ever seen this year was CJ Anderson on a play that got called back. That touchdown play, he should have been stopped once he got, maybe it was a catch. But man, it was something special. I know you were watching, Nathan. How are you?
And Kubiak was watching too, by the way, because he was at home, right? So he's watching and he's going, "Oh no, no, no!" So I think that actually helps because sometimes when you're there, you have these feelings and you think things are going worse. But I think if he's watching tape, he's like, "Oh man, CJ, I'm sorry."
He's so good, yeah. That's where I'm at with it, Nathan. Nathan, what's your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I agree with everything you both have been saying. Booker this past week saw fewer snaps and a fewer percentage of the snaps than he had been seeing these past couple weeks. And based on how well Anderson played, I believe he would have had double his yards if those holding penalties wouldn't have been called. Plus, he would have had the touchdown. So I think Booker is further away from being the guy in Denver than he was a week ago this time. So he's not someone that I would pick up now if you weren't picking him up before.
Real quick, I just want to get your guys' thoughts on Dwayne Washington from Detroit. Would you guys grab him over Booker or no? Detroit kind of needs a running back.
It's a disaster there. I don't know if I can touch anyone there. To be honest with you, Zach Zenner actually had some interesting plays, but he doesn't get any work. So I don't know what they're doing. It's a complete disaster.
Nathan, would you take Washington or would you take Booker?
I would take Washington just because Detroit's had some injuries at running back, and if those guys don't get 100% or re-injure themselves, then Washington will have the opportunity to see a lot more snaps, where I'm not seeing that opportunity with Booker unless Anderson gets hurt.
All right. And then the last running back we're going to touch on is something happened this morning. Green Bay traded for Niall Davis. Not Niles Davis, it's Niall Davis. Niall Davis has not been fantasy relevant for a long time. I don't really know how to feel about this move because there was a time where Niall Davis did have some value. And with Eddie Lacy dealing with his ankle injury, that it's not going to get better if they keep trotting him out there. It's really not. James Starks is going to miss multiple weeks. They don't have another running back. Niall Davis is probably worth a pickup, right, Brendan?
Yeah. And I think Eddie Lacy is a buy low. I think he has the highest elusive rating right now on PFF. He's incredibly efficient. I know that sounds crazy, and I wrote an article about it today, but they don't. If Niall Davis is his only backup, he's not going to keep. I think he's even going to have less carries taken away from Niall Davis than he did James Starks. So I just think this means James Starks is pretty much out for the whole season, and they have to have someone on the team, and probably Kansas City was just willing to give it up. I mean, I don't think that this is anything other than that.
That was the weird part for me, though, is that Niall Davis, he's never caught more than 18 passes in a season. So that's not like really the James Starks role. He's more like the third down back that'll be mixed in on first and second down. This is more of like, I think this is a more concern with Eddie Lacy. I think they want to give him some time. What's your thoughts on it, Nathan?
I think it's more has to do with James Starks, just since Starks is out and Lacy is the only other halfback on the roster.
Yeah.
I think Davis will see some playing time, probably not this week because the Packers have the Thursday game, so that's just 2 days to learn the offense. But in the future, I think Davis will see a good 20, 30, maybe even 40% of the snaps just because they don't want Lacy on the field all that much. But I don't think Davis is that strong of an option. He's only averaged, I think, 3.4 yards per carry in his career. The last time that he saw more than 30 snaps, he had one of the worst games we've seen out of a running back. So I don't think Davis is a great option unless Lacy does get hurt, and then Davis is the only halfback on the roster. But if that doesn't happen, I'm not excited about Davis. So if you're in a very deep league, go ahead, but I wouldn't in a shallower league.
There you go. In my PSA on the running back position, this is an important one, guys. Like, this is the biggest one that I wanted to make, is that if Derrick Henry is on your league's waiver wire, steal him. Like, take him right now. There are a few players that are on your waiver wire every now and then that can be league winners, and he's one of them. He's one where if DeMarco Murray, if something happened to him, people would spend 100% of their free agent acquisition budget to get Derrick Henry. He's available in 48% of leagues right now on Yahoo. That's what I know on there. I don't know about the other league settings, but typically it's usually around the same. Derrick Henry, instead of rostering guys like Bilal Powell or these other guys that you can find replacement value for, these, Bobby Rainey, Jacquizz Rodgers, get a league winner, pick up Derrick Henry, especially with bye weeks now getting past the way. Derrick Henry, what he has shown on tape, he makes it look. I've watched many highlights of him in the NFL so far, and like it looks like somebody hit fast forward, like when he's running the ball. For a guy that big, he's not supposed to run that fast. So Derrick Henry, grab him. But before we go on further, let's get a word from our sponsors. All right, guys. So the wide receiver position it may not be as deep as the running back position this week, but it's still an interesting week. I put Cameron Meredith at the top of my list here because he's still available, and I think 45%.
Crazy.
Yeah, 45% of leagues. So if he's there, we don't need to talk about that too much. He leads the NFL in targets the last 2 weeks. He's number 2 in PPR scoring behind Odell Beckham. We don't need to talk about Cameron Meredith. We know that he's going to be really good. But one of the players that everybody's wondering about and whether or not you should be running to pick him up, Nathan, that's Kenny Britt. Kenny Britt had a fantastic game this week. But, I don't know if I can ever trust Kenny Britt. It's Kenny Britt with Case Keenum. Now, I did go through and I looked. He's played 10 games with Keenum. In those games, he averages right around 11 PPR points a game. In the 27 other games without him over the last 3 years, 7.9 PPR points. So he's playing better with Keenum. He's 100%, 250 more yards than Tavon Austin, despite 7 fewer targets. How are you feeling about Kenny Britt? Do you think that he's an every week starter, that he can be, or do you think that let somebody else deal with that headache?
The more that I was looking into Britt, the more that I started to buy into it. He's seeing more targets than he's had in the past few years, which before he was seeing just over 4 targets per game, and now he's seeing just under 7 targets. And he's just been consistently getting 75 plus yards. And it's someone where if you have a wide receiver on a bye, you don't have the wide receiver depth. He's someone that you can plug into your lineup and you can be pretty sure you'll get at least a couple points. This past week, he did have 2 touchdowns, and he's never really been a big touchdown guy. So if you're looking for a huge game out of wide receiver or someone with really high upside, he might not be your best pick. But if you want consistency, I think Britt can definitely help you out there.
Brandon, you were shaking your head. You like Kenny Britt, huh?
Yeah. I think he has a really high floor, actually. I think he's always going to be involved with their passing game, and that's what we're seeing so far this season. I think this is also a really good thing for Todd Gurley owners. I think this is good that people are going to have to start actually defending wide receivers on this team. They're like, wow. Not only that, but actually the touchdown threat is Brian Quick. The only reason why he didn't get the kind of look this week is because of his injury that he popped up on the injury report towards the end of last week. So I'm actually kind of high on Brian Quick, too, as kind of a sneaky bye-week fill-in every once in a while as well. well. But I will say that one of the things that we have in our signature stats here at Pro Football Focus is that we have kind of a wide receiver ranking, which is actually the quarterback ranking when throwing towards a particular wide receiver. Number 1 is Dak Prescott throwing towards Cole Beasley. Number 2 is Case Keenum throwing towards Kenny Britt. Crazy. Those are 1 and 2 in the league right now. Go look at our signature stats. It's nuts. So I think that it's important to note that. I think that when it comes to people you can actually pick up and play, Kenny Britt might be the top pick of this week, frankly. His ownership is way too low for what he's doing. And there are a lot of, instead of going out there and picking up Devontae Booker, who you have to like sit there and put a voodoo doll out there for CJ Anderson, why don't you get a guy you can actually play like Kenny Britt? So I don't want to say he's going to win you your league necessarily, but he's a great wide receiver 3, flex play, someone with a lot of upside. And certainly in DFS, he's someone that you want to plug into GPPs, what have you. They have some decent matchups coming up, actually. And I think that, Case Keenum is improving every week. I'm not going to tell you that he's fantastic or a Hall of Famer or anything, but I think that this is actually someone you can play today, and that's rare out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's got at least 4 catches in every game, 67 yards receiving in 4 of the 6 games. So he definitely is showing a bit of a floor. Although, as Nathan mentioned, the upside, the ceiling might not be where you want it to be. Yeah. One player who showed a high ceiling this week, but it may have been kind of inflated on one play, that's Kendall Wright. Kendall Wright, he only played 22 snaps in this game. Nathan, do you know why he played such a small amount? Do you think this is more of like them getting reacclimated with the offense because he basically wasn't there for the entire training camp? What's your take on Kendall Wright? Is he somebody that can eventually maybe get back into the lineup over Tajay Sharp?
I could see that maybe happening, but I don't think it'll happen right away. I think Wright would need to play a lot better than he had been recently in order to start seeing those snaps. But he's someone where in Tennessee's offense, with how much they've been rotating the wide receivers after Sharp, and if Sharp starts to see fewer snaps, then that'll just be more of a rotation. But I wouldn't jump on Wright quite yet. He's someone that I'd monitor over these next few weeks, but until we see more out of him, I just wouldn't trust him yet.
Yeah, that's something to say, that just to pay attention to our Twitter accounts, because some people don't have access to the stats, and I get that. But, if you follow us, we'll let you know the snap counts on our Twitter handles. Nathan, that's pretty much what he does if he's covering that game. But, Kendall Wright is someone that I'm going to be monitoring myself just to see where that number goes for dynasty purposes too. Brandon, one player that people can pick up and maybe spot start this Thursday is Ty Montgomery. Devontae Adams did, in fact, suffer a concussion, forcing Ty Montgomery onto the field. I believe he saw 10 targets this week. How would you feel about spot starting Ty Montgomery, and maybe give us a name or two that you might start him over?
Okay. Well, that's the only game he has a catch in so far this season. So it's a little bit hard for me to feel fantastic about that. Mm-hmm. Certainly I'd rather start Kenny Britt. I'd rather start Cole Beasley. I'd rather start quite a few people. But yeah, sure. We have to also hope that, Aaron Rodgers is going to turn it around. Again, it is at home, which, is good. Maybe he'll get a little Lambeau leap in there, but he's okay to spot start, but we just have such a small, again, those are the only 10 catches he's had all season. So it's a little hard for me to feel incredibly confident telling people, but certainly he's a Green Bay Packer, and you're hoping that in a divisional matchup that he'll live up to the same billing. But that's it. That's all we have for him this season.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going on a limb. You're more betting on the quarterback in the situation than anything. Bryce Callahan covers the slot for the Bears. I don't know. So, Nathan, do you know if once Montgomery came in, did Cobb move outside, or did Cobb stay in the slot and Montgomery play outside? Do you know how that worked out?
A lot of it was actually because the Packers were so thin at running back. Lacey, even though he was the only healthy halfback on the roster, he only played half of snaps. So Montgomery, he had, I think, 23 snaps out of the backfield versus just 13 lining up mostly in the slot. So I think Montgomery could continue to see a high number of snaps this week, just because I don't see Niall Davis being ready this week yet. So the combination of Montgomery and Cobb both lining up at running back at times, I think that really helps Montgomery's value just for this week.
See, that's a fantastic stat right there. That's why we got Nathan here with us at PFF. And before we move on to the tight ends, because we are running short on time here, my PSAs at the wide receiver position are two guys that have been sitting there on the waiver wire in most leagues because of their injuries, and that's Corey Coleman and Dante Moncrief. Those two are going to be coming back to the field soon. Their timelines are almost up. I know we haven't heard much on either situation, but it was a pretty clear-cut time period. So I would be grabbing those two guys rather than hanging on to somebody like, maybe Anquan Bolden that you've been playing for the last couple of weeks, or Brandon LaFell, something like that. But instead, don't look at the regular wide receivers that everybody's looking at every single week. Just take a gander at your waiver wire. You'd be surprised at some of the names that are on there, considering their ownership percentages, how low they've become. At the tight end, I really did not think that Hunter Henry was so low owned. Brandon, he's 36% owned in Yahoo leagues. 36.
I have him in all three of mine, though.
Yeah, so do I. Hunter Henry should be owned everywhere. There is literally not a reason with the tight end position the way it's been. There's not a reason. Brandon, what is wrong? Why did people continue to doubt him? Is it because of Antonio Gates and they still think that he's going to steal the work? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's a Gates fear. Also, he's a rookie, and we all, as fantasy analysts, tell people not to pick up rookie tight ends. I think this is the one sole exception. John Carlson actually is the only rookie tight end in the PFF era who has gone for more than 600 yards the entire time. That's it for rookies. Yeah. Wow. And John Carlson, you would have to look back to even remember who he is. So
Seattle, right?
Yeah. So rookie tight ends, tough stuff. Now, Rob Gronkowski had a ton of touchdowns his rookie season, but it wasn't yardage. So that could be Hunter Henry as well. Listen, he's playing in a ton of snaps. I mean, it just continues, you guys. In fact, I always write this down. So he played in 45 of the 66 snaps this week, Gates in 31 of 66, and that's with Gates being up in snaps. So his usage is real. It's not going away. Now, 11 different tight ends scored a touchdown this week. Only 3 are owned in more than 10% of leagues. One is Hunter Henry, one is Rob Gronkowski, and the other one was Kobe Flater. That's how dire this position is. Only 4 tight ends have over 30 receptions on the season. It's Greg Olsen, Zach Miller, Dennis Pitta, and Jordan Reed. And if Jordan Reed comes back this season, you can color me shocked. He just suffered his 6th concussion since 2011. It's very serious, and maybe he will come back, but they're going to have to be very careful with him. I think this is a very scary situation. Dennis Pitta hasn't gone over 300 yards and hasn't scored a touchdown. I think the one you could trade for is Zach Miller. Otherwise, you need to pick up Hunter Henry and call yourself lucky.
Hunter Henry, Nathan, I mean, the past 4 weeks have been magical what this guy's been doing. It's 72 yards or a touchdown in every week. He scored in 3 straight weeks now. Yeah, his snap total went down with Antonio Gates kind of back in the fold. But if you watched on the field, and I know you were watching that game versus Denver, I think we can clearly see that Hunter Henry is the better option for them right now. He can stretch the field. He can move. I think and Gates isn't even a great run blocker at this point in his career. So how are you feeling about Hunter Henry? Is there something that we're missing here?
I feel the same way that you both do. I think you definitely need to add him unless you're in the one league with me where someone dropped him before this matchup because I want to get my waiver claim for him. So don't add him in that league, but any other league, definitely add him. I think Greg Olsen is the only other tight end to score more over this past month than Henry has. I don't think there's that many more tight ends in the league right now that I'd rather have over Henry. Yep. So definitely pick him up if he's available as fast as you can.
Yeah, no, at a position that's very volatile, Hunter Henry has been basically a top 5 tight end every single week. And I said it before, like some people mocked the pick that the Chargers made of Henry when they did, saying that, they didn't really, why did they draft him so early and this and that, because it was a weak tight end class and they felt the need to reach. I'm like, well, first off, were we ever convinced that Ladarius Green was really any good? Do we even know that Ladarius Green is any good at football?
No.
I don't think he's ever had a game over 80 yards. Hunter Henry already does in his career. Hunter Henry's already shown to be better. His hands are fantastic. That showed in college. So Hunter Henry, the real deal. Grab him. If you're looking for some alternatives, Charles Clay's got to be one of them. Nathan, over 4 of his last 5 games, he's caught 5 passes. So, that's always good in PPR leagues. He's not catching any touchdowns, which is kind of odd because Tyrod Taylor, he's throwing to Justin Hunter, Robert Woods. I don't know. Are we looking at some positive regression here for Charles Clay? And would you pick him up if you were in a bad spot at tight end? Let's say you just lost Dwayne Allen.
If I was in a bad spot and lost Dwayne Allen, first I'd pick up Jack Doyle instead, but Clay's someone where he's been getting the 5 catches. He's been getting okay amount of yards. So if you want someone that you can depend on getting at least a couple points out of, go ahead and get Clay. He's bound to score a touchdown eventually at some point, probably 2 or 3 over the course of the rest of the season. But he's someone where most weeks he'll get you a couple points, and if you're happy with that, then go for it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where I'm at. It's like that boring streamer thing, but if you're looking at someone that's seeing 5 to 7 targets per game, it's not a bad option at tight end rather than throwing the Hail Mary, like someone like maybe Jesse James, who's very touchdown dependent.
I'd rather have Jesse James over Charles Clay, no problem.
Well, not without Ben Roethlisberger, I wouldn't.
No, absolutely not. No. But I mean, like rest of season when Ben comes back. No, I'd rather have a tight end that's touchdown dependent than one that has 0 touchdowns and 3 drops on the season on only 29 targets.
You laughed and you said yes when Jack Doyle's name came up, and I'm right there with you. I think Jack Doyle is probably would probably be above Charles Clay, right?
Yeah. For sure. I mean, even with sharing time with Dwayne Allen, what have you, he still has 23 targets. He's caught 20 of them. That's a great percentage for 204 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that makes him actually one of the top tight ends regardless on the season so far this year, you guys. Sorry. Them's the breaks. That's this year at tight end. And that's what I'm saying about Hunter Henry. Like, just run. Yeah.
I think that Doyle has actually outscored Dwayne Allen in more games this year than the other way around. So to see Doyle get an opportunity to be the guy for a couple weeks, yeah, I think he's a fantastic option. Nathan, let's close this out. CJ Fedorowicz, a lot of people talk about tight ends and how it takes time for them to get worked into the NFL. It takes time to grasp systems. And there's been a lot of tight ends out there in Houston, and it seems like every game had been someone different. But recently, we've been seeing CJ Fedorowicz being worked in more and more and more. Is he someone that people should start grabbing in dynasty leagues? Let's pretend it's not a very deep dynasty league, and it's not like our dynasty league that we play in where we have 36 roster spots. It's not like that. But let's pretend you're
killing
playing
it
in like a 25 man dynasty league, right? What would you start looking at CJ Fedorowicz as a potential guy that you'd like to have on your team?
I think so. He's a young enough tight end. He's been seeing targets recently. He's been catching a decent amount. He's been grading out well over these past couple weeks. So it's a fairly small sample size, but for a tight end that was a high draft pick that they expected to do well, he's finally starting to do it. So he has 2 touchdowns these past 3 weeks, which is just as many as he had the first 2+ seasons put together. So it looks like he's starting to put things all together. So I'd pick him up if I was in a deep enough dynasty league. Yeah.
Yeah, it was questioning to me why Brock Osweiler kept on targeting DeAndre Hopkins when he was shadowed by Vontae Davis, and everybody else was kind of up against backup corners. And it's like, start throwing your tight ends, hit those guys, hit strong, somebody, do something. And he finally started hitting him at the end of the game. They turned around and won the game. But guys, that's going to wrap up our waiver wire show for today. Hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And like I said, my PSA this week is just go to your waiver wire. Don't just focus on the names that popped up this week. Look at who's been dropped in your league. Take advantage of it. But that's going to do it, guys. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Myself at Mike Tagliere NFL. Brandon is at Brandon Her FFB. And Nathan is at PFF_Nate Jahnke. And I'm not even going to try and spell that.
Jahnke.
There you go. All right, guys. But until next time, lights out.